Good morning and welcome to the Office of the Prime Minister's weekly press briefing. It is a pleasure to have each of you here with us. We have a very exciting press briefing planned for you. On the outset, I just need to apologize to our reporters. We were supposed to have the health minister as well as the education minister, but as you can imagine, they are locked in meetings right now, just trying to iron out just the final details for the opening of school, which is going to happen on Monday, and you will get those details as soon as those meetings are over. So I just want to invite our first speaker, who's going to be Lovato Duncanson. He's the parliamentary commissioner. As you know, we have local government elections that's going to happen next week, and so he's going to give us a little bit more information about that, and then you'll be able to ask him questions. Mr. Duncanson.
Good afternoon. Today I would like to take this opportunity to inform the general public, particularly members of the public on the island of Grand Bahama and the Family Islands, of the upcoming local government elections and the measures taken up to this point. On December 28, 2021, the register for the local government election was closed. December 29, 2021, writs of elections were issued. On January the 6th, nomination day was held throughout the Family of Islands and Grand Bahama for persons wishing to present themselves as candidate for the upcoming local government elections. We also would have published those notices at the various Family Island administrator offices, and so persons throughout the Family Islands are encouraged to visit the Family Island administrator offices to view copies of the actual nomination forms. Those forms were subsequently published in the newspaper, and they're also on the Parliamentary Registration Department official website at elections.gov.bs. On January the 17th, 2022, we would have published additional local government election notices, as well as we would have made available at all of the Family Island administrator offices, including the Freeport Parliamentary Registration Department office and the Parliamentary Registration Department's office on Farrington Road, certified copies of the register for the upcoming local government election. And so to all candidates, persons who would have nominated for the various positions within the Family Island elections coming up, we want to encourage you, we want to invite you to visit the local government administrators, the Family Island administrator's office, so that you can obtain a copy of the certified register, which was made available on Monday the 17th. Local government election is scheduled for Thursday the 27th of January 2022. That's next week Thursday, and the recount is scheduled for the day thereafter, the 28th of January 2022. By way of an update, certainly health and safety is a priority. And so we at the Parliamentary Registration Department continue with our efforts to consult with the healthcare professionals, and the healthcare professionals provided us with guidelines to adhere to during the upcoming local government elections, which includes election poll workers were, and will continue to be encouraged to be vaccinated, or at least commence with the vaccination process. All poll workers, that includes the election agents, are required to wear face masks. That includes persons presenting themselves to vote on local government election day. It is mandatory that persons wear a face mask. Our poll workers were provided with medical grade face masks in addition to face shields. The healthcare professionals have stressed that our poll workers wear both the face shields and the medical grade face masks that were made available by the Parliamentary Registration Department. Campaigners will not be allowed within 100 yards of the polling place. Also, hand sanitization stations will be made available so that when persons present themselves, they will be able to sanitize their hands. When a voter presents him or herself to the polls, there's the mandatory requirement for the wearing of face masks. The only point that that face mask will be lowered for a brief moment is for proper identification, and then immediately that mask is to be placed back in its proper location. The minimum classroom sizes we seek to adhere to is 30 feet by 25 feet, and larger rooms where available. Workstations throughout the polls are scheduled to be sanitized throughout the entire election day. This includes the surfaces that persons will mark the ballots upon and the other surfaces used by our poll workers. All of the walkways outside of the polling place are scheduled to be marked clearly with a 3 to 6 feet distance so that there's proper social distancing that takes place. We have liaised with the Royal Bahamas Police Force, and where it is possible for their protocol, their health and safety ambassadors, the COVID-19 police, where COVID-19 police officers are available, or officers, I should say, we will be engaging their services to assist with the social distancing on the outside. Natural ventilation. We will seek to utilize natural ventilation by ensuring that the windows are open, doors remain open, etc. We want to re-emphasize that health and safety is paramount. We are in ongoing consultation with the healthcare professionals. I would have been in consultation with the CMO as recent as yesterday, and we will, if there are any adjustments that the scientific community references or provides for us as a reference, we will seek to adhere to those adjustments if they are made, and we will do so in the swiftest time possible. There, following nomination day, we would have had some 600 plus candidates who presented themselves for nomination, 617. The register for the Family Island for the local government elections comprises of some 29,000 plus individuals. For the Family Islands and Grand Bahama, some 30,000 plus individuals, which gives us a total of around 60,000 individuals who are scheduled, who are eligible to participate in the upcoming local government elections. We want to remind the Bahamian population that local government elections are scheduled to take place on the islands of Grand Bahama and the Family Island. There's no local government elections on the island of New Providence. Hence, we are continuing to monitor the conditions on the ground, and should circumstances dictate, we will make necessary adjustments as it relates to health and safety measures that are outlined to us by the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Health officials. We are scheduled to conduct local government elections in all of the 20 councillor districts. That will comprise of both contested and uncontested, and we are scheduled to conduct town committee local government elections in all of the town committee areas with the exception of one, and that is scheduled to take place on the 27th of January 2021. And so we just want the general population to know that notices have gone out, reminders that persons are entitled to that 1 hour plus the extra hour for voting on election day, which is next week. We want to remind the general population that should you not have your voter's card in hand when you present yourself to cast your vote on next week, Thursday, that and government-issued identification, such as a passport, driver's license, the NIB Smart Card that has your image on it, can be used to identify yourself when you enter the polling place. And so the general population is reminded that on next week, Thursday, local government elections are scheduled to be held between the hours of 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. At this time, with that brief information that we would have provided, are there any questions that you would have that you would want me to respond to as it relates to local government election, the members of the press?
We do start with Jasmine Brown from Our News.
Good morning. I know that we held a general election during a pandemic, but the fact of the matter is that we are currently in a fourth wave, seeing numbers like we have never seen before. How confident are you that the department is going to be able to hold a safe local government election in the middle of the worst wave of this pandemic?
Similar to the general election, there are healthcare professionals who are engaged within the public service. We would have liaised. We continue with our consultation with the healthcare professionals, and we will continue to be guided by the science as the healthcare professionals provide. It is our intent to follow the guidelines provided to us by the healthcare professionals, which includes some of those items that I would have mentioned a few minutes ago, the face shields, the face masks, medical grade, that is, not the cloth ones, the medical grade face masks. We discussed this most recent variant that is affecting not just the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, but the region and the entire world. We would have had those conversations with healthcare professionals, and the healthcare professionals have provided us with a reminder, with an update, that those guidelines provided to us up to this point are sufficient for us to maintain, to adhere to, as it relates to this most recent situation that we find ourselves in. And so the Parliamentary Registration Department, as it relates to the science and adherence to those guidelines, we will be guided by the healthcare professionals. And so certainly what we have done is we have purchased the necessary items. We have shipped those items to all of our Family Island locations to ensure that those items are on the ground for next week. Our last shipments would have gone out the early part of this week, which includes the sanitization solutions, and so we will continue to adhere to the guidelines provided to us by the healthcare professionals.
We take our next question from Sloan Smith from Eyewitness Digital.
Hi, good day, Mr. Duncanson. My question is, what is the expectation for voter participation in these local governments? We did see a drop in voter participation during the general elections. Are we seeing any voter apathy during this time? Thank you.
What we would say at this particular time is we've seen as much as 617 persons present themselves as candidates for this upcoming local government election. I've been advised from persons who would have been within the Parliamentary Registration Department for some time that if we look closely at previous ballots prepared, previous candidates who presented themselves, the numbers of persons who presented themselves for this upcoming local government election exceeds the numbers that were previously provisions would have been made for. And so the one thing we can speak to is the candidates, individuals who presented themselves. There appear to be a healthy appetite for service within the local government community. There appears to be a healthy appetite for persons who actually presented themselves as candidates. And so we can say that based on the candidates, the number of candidates that have presented themselves, there's certainly evidence to support that the amount of persons who have presented themselves exceed previous numbers. Now, as it relates to how many persons actually come out and vote on next week, Thursday, we do know that the register in its entirety for Grand Bahama and the Family Island comprise of some 60,000 voters. Within the contested areas, we have determined that there are approximately 50,000 voters who are on the register, who are part of those polling divisions, those town areas where elections are scheduled to be contested. And so what we are minded of within the Parliamentary Registration Department is that there are some 50,000 persons out of that 60,000 number who are eligible, whose names appear on the register. And so our focus at the Parliamentary Registration Department is to ensure that the health and safety guidelines provided to us are adhered to, that we ensure that when persons present themselves, whatever numbers they present themselves in, that the measures are in place to ensure that they're able to cast their vote in a safe and a healthy environment. So that's the direction, that is where our focus is at this time, and that is the manner in which I can respond to your question.
Thank you very much. I don't think that there are any other questions from the press, so just one final check. Excellent. Thank you so much, Mr. Duncan.
Thank you.
Have three announcements for you, just an update on where we are with our mask distribution as well as free testing. And then, of course, the communications director is going to come and answer some questions and give you some further updates. So I start now with mask distribution. In an effort to ensure Bahamians have the right tools to fight the pandemic, the government of the Bahamas began its mass distribution of medical grade masks several weeks ago. Thousands of masks have been given out through our partners at the Red Cross, Salvation Army, as well as through testing sites and vaccine centers. Medical grade masks better protects people from the coronavirus, and that's why we've expanded our distribution sites to 3 NGOs. NEMA would have distributed 6,000 masks to the Great Commission Ministries, Hands for Hunger, and International Deliverance Praying Ministry ran by Bishop Lawrence Roll. Each site received 2,000 masks to be given out to people who visit those feeding centers. Now, those people would have said that they would have expressed their sincere thanks to the government for its timely donation, noting that Free Mask Initiative is a great tool to help Bahamians and residents protect themselves in the face of the pandemic, irrespective of socioeconomic status. In the coming days, the government will also expand free mask distribution to Grand Bahama, Andros, Central Andros, and Eleuthera. Now, just a testing update, because free mask distribution is just one part of the Davis administration's effort to combat COVID-19. January has also seen the rollout of free testing, as you know, in New Providence, the hiring of 50 nurses to help alleviate healthcare system strain, and the launch of the Ask the Doctors Town Hall series, which is a virtual forum that allows people to pose COVID-19 related health concerns directly to medical professionals. Now, since starting our free testing pilot program in New Providence on January 8th, 7,565 people have been tested, and 567 of those presented positive. And as you know, those sites are at the Kendall Isaacs Gymnasium, Malia, and South Beach Clinic. We will then roll out free testing in Grand Bahama, as promised, of course, this weekend. And residents can begin registering as early as tomorrow on covidtest.gov.bs. The free testing begins this Saturday at Christ the King Hall. We would like to thank our partners in Grand Bahama who have helped to make this initiative a reality. I now invite the Director of Communications with further remarks and to answer your questions.
Good morning. Let me just begin with a point of clarity. Over the last week or so, we've been discussing the previous administration food program. Let me begin by saying that the government has concluded its report on the food program. The idea that we shouldn't audit taxpayers' investment is ludicrous. I believe that we owe it to the Bahamian people, insofar as public policy and the measurement of public policy, to be transparent and accountable to the Bahamian people. Last year, you would have known, in the past 2 years, the previous administration and this current government continue to spend taxpayers' dollars on our response to COVID-19. I think by law, in the emergency orders, it requires the government to provide an accounting for that audit. What we have said, insofar as the food program, is that after interviewing government officials, after in dialogues with conversation internally, there was a significant lack of information that speaks to the government interaction and relationship with NGOs in the food program. This was an independent assessment. This is an independent view. And I think that whilst the report has been concluded, when the public receive the document in the public domain, they will be able to themselves see the conclusion of that report and the view of that report. This is not a political effort. I remind people that the government of the Bahamas, regardless of the administration, have a responsibility to assess and to measure programs with the view of ensuring accountability, and where there are policy gaps, to make improvements in those policy gaps. So if we are confronted with circumstances, whether it be a hurricane, whether it be a health crisis, to improve our mechanisms of reporting and the application and administration of public policy. But without that, at that conclusion, any questions from the members of the media?
We start with Jasmine Brown from Our News.
Morning again. I know you spoke about accountability. Just wondering if there is going to be, or when will we know the cost of that recent Expo 2020 trip, and will it be a detailed report?
I believe that the Minister of Economic Affairs committed to the members of the press this week that the government will move in tabling the expenditure of that trip. It's something that the government is committed to doing, and hopefully that report will be committed very soon.
Jasmine, your second question.
Wanted to also, another big story that broke late yesterday was also the Hilton matter. Wanted to find out if there's been any conversation since yesterday between the Prime Minister. I know he came back. I know the DPM has addressed it. Has the Prime Minister been in contact with the owners of the Hilton and the next move for the Davis administration? Because that's a very huge property in prime downtown area.
What I can say is that the Director of Investment, along with the Deputy Prime Minister, remain in conversation with the owners of the property with a view of bringing together a solution that is amicable to the future of the property and its staff. The government of the Bahamas have an interest in protecting the well-being of Bahamians. And I think that those conversations continue. Insofar as the Prime Minister, I cannot confirm whether he have spoken to the hotel owners. For the most part, this conversation has been driven primarily through the Deputy Prime Minister, who have carriage of investments in the country. Also, there's a labor component. I could be assured that the Minister of Labor is also in conversation with this latest development on Hiltons.
We now go to Sloan Smith from Eyewitness Digital.
Good day. So yesterday, the Christian Council would have come out basically questioning the government's intention as it relates to moving forward towards cannabis regulation here in the country. It's a part of this administration's speech from the throne to focus on marijuana legislation. One of those points made by the Christian Council is that there hasn't been any plan set forth in terms of how this administration plans to move forward with it. When can we see, I guess, those plans? We know the Minister of Agriculture would have recently sent out a statement saying that the Family Island is prime for, this form of agriculture. What's the position?
What can I say? What I can say, Sloan, is insofar as the public policy in responding to the introduction of the marijuana industry in the Bahamas, what we had outlined in our previous press conference last week was the government's public policy commitment insofar as legislation in bringing about some kind of legislation to Parliament. We are still in the preliminary stages on how the cannabis industry would look. I think, as you could see, as indicated by the Minister of Agriculture, he also indicated the opportunities for that kind of development on our Family Island. So I think we are pretty much in our initial stage. I think the commitment we have is wanting to see that legislation framework brought to Parliament this year.
Sloan, do you have another question?
Yes, and still on this note, the leader of the Free National Movement he's also come out and spoken about how much this government is going to utilize the former administration's previous documents. We know they had a few legislations, they had a few plans in place. What is the government's positions on their, stop, review, canceling their legislation movement?
I think one of the things that you look at is that the government of Bahamas is a continuous process. If the previous administration undertaken a policy review or a policy guideline, that becomes the foundation in which this government will start. Where there is consensus around the policy that is insofar as beneficial to the Bahamian people, I think that would be something that we would be encouraged to look at and to see how best it serves the policy interests as well as opportunities for those who would be participating. I think it may be premature to suggest that the government did not look at it. I would remind persons that when a government change and the previous administration commit to a policy overview insofar as research, when a new government comes in, that is a part of the foundation in which we proceed with public policy implementation.
Thank you very much. We now go to Tyler Simonet from JCN.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Okay,
Good
Tyler.
morning. Hi. My first question is related to the CDC. Recently putting the Bahamas on a level 4 travel advisory. Is this putting any kind of pressure on the government to try and dial back when it comes to tourism?
Well, I will say this. I think the Minister of Health, as well as the Deputy Prime Minister, spoke to the issue. We believe that we are at the stage in the pandemic where we must both manage the economic well-being of the Bahamas as well as the health well-being of Bahamians. I think that the Minister of Health said that he saw some encouraging signs on where we are in this pandemic. I think it is also to note that we are not in the peak season of tourism at the moment. I think that season began to continue in February. So hopefully we continue to see signs of improvement as we in the next coming days to see how we could satisfy the CDC. The government continue with its efforts to combat COVID-19 through the distribution of masks, the expansion of testing. And so we will also begin the public education component of our campaign through town halls as well as PSAs to encourage Bahamians to follow the health protocols and make the best decision to protect them and their families.
Tyler, your second question.
My second question is in relation to education. I'm not sure if Mr. Rahman would be able to answer it, but are there any protocols set in place for when schools open back up next week, Monday, for if there is a COVID outbreak or a positive COVID case among the students or teachers?
What I can do for you, Tyler, after this press conference, if I could arrange a conversation with you and the Minister of Health so he could satisfy your questions. If not the Minister of Health, the CMO. So just give me a call afterwards.
Thank you, Tyler. We move to Rashad Roll from the Tribune.
Hey, Rashad.
Hey, yeah, just to go back to the cannabis issue, does the administration believe that further consultation or another round of consultation will be needed as the Christian Council president insists?
Well, one of the things I'm still confused on the position that the government just announced to the public its policy intentions for the year. Those who are familiar with public policy would know that a key component of that public policy implementation is being able to speak with stakeholders. The government will meet with a number of stakeholders to determine consultation and feedback on the public policy, how it will impact consumers, business. Of course, there are key voices in the community, including the church. The president of the Christian Council, Mr. Fernanda, knows well that irrespective of the issue or regardless of the issue, we always consult with them. And I think this has been the common trend even during the pandemic. We gave through the Christian Council the ability to create rules to govern the guidelines of their churches. So I would act under the impression that we have a healthy dialogue and relationship with the members of the Christian community insofar as their views on any matter of public policy. To suggest that this process is way in its final stage, it will be an incorrect assessment. I think what we are speaking to is the intent of the government insofar as public policy.
Your second question, Rashad.
Yeah, okay. So there's been some controversy over the selection of some groups that went to Dubai for the event, in particular the press secretary's group, his choir group. Are you able to address the controversy and outline the process that led to the selection of the various groups?
No problem, Rashad. What I can say is that this process was steered through a organizing committee for the Bahamas National Day. There were several components that influenced the decision-making process. One, cost and size of the delegation. As you were aware that the government was elected on September 17th. We were elected on September 16th. The Prime Minister was sworn in that weekend. The Cabinet was sworn in the following week. The exhibition expo opened in October. As you would be aware that this process had begun sometime under the previous administration. This would have been one of the many things that this government would have inherited. Cabinet of the Bahamas made a decision that they weren't going to continue with the previous agreement of $1.7 million by the previous F&M government. We reduced that cost to $1 million. The guideline and parameters insofar as the cultural expression and talent with Bahamian musicians or cooks was given by the National Day coordinator. After that guidelines was given, the committee would have, through a matter of inquiry and expression, solicit the prospective persons and individuals who participate in the National Day. Some of those persons provided the committee or the organizing committee with a quote of costs for service. Once the budget was cut drastically, that impacted their ability to go. And and not only was the budget cut, also the size of the delegation was cut. And so what happened was you had, in many instances, for example, the Junkanoo Group, they were paid for service. The Royal Bahamas Police Force, the Bahamas All-Star Band, and the Shabbat Choir went free of charge. Let me give you an example. The Bahamas All-Star Band would have submitted a quote to the government of the Bahamas for their participation. Once the committee realized that there were some budgetary constraints, they reached back out to the leadership of that band. The leadership of the band said, listen, we want to represent and be ambassadors to the country. Is there any way we could go for free? And that was facilitated. And so once the numbers were cut, once the budget, there were some budgetary restraints, that formed the basis of who was represented, who made up the group that represented the Bahamas. Keep in mind, the persons who make up the group in their own right have been ambassadors for the Bahamas for years. They've traveled by the United States, Canada, around the Caribbean, and so they have their unique reputation of representing the Bahamas. So cost, as well as the size of the amended size of the delegation influenced who stayed and who went.
We will now go to Jasper Ward from the Nassau Guardian.
Oh, before we move on to that next question, something I want to clear up. There is some element of fake news that is traveling around indicating that Bahamians are stuck in Dubai. I want to say that this week the telecommunications company in the United States introduced the rollout of 5G technology in certain cities. That impacted air transportation, and many airlines around the world canceled their flights. The flight arrangement from Dubai to Orlando was impacted. The government of the Bahamas rerouted, which it was a significant amount of individuals, rerouted them, and it made some adjustment through their travels. What I can say is the group landed in New York last night. They take off from New York to Miami today, where they will return to Nassau tonight. There is a situation where one of the members in the group tested positive for COVID-19. They, through their travel arrangements, have insurance. They continue to receive a per diem from the government of the Bahamas. Their accommodations are set. They also get testing every 48 hours, and once that person tests negative, they will be sent back to the Bahamas. So I want to dispel any view that that Bahamians are left stranded in Dubai. There was a situation beyond our control where the airlines reacted, and we are pleased to say that have been resolved now.
Jasper, you can go ahead.
Good morning. Has the government been able to get any documentation from the former chair of the Food Task Force on the spending?
Well,
and is the government satisfied with how satisfied with the $54 million was fully accounted for?
Well, I think that what happened was that after interviewing senior government officials during the audit process, there was a lack of satisfaction that there was sufficient documents on record insofar as information pertaining to the food program. Based on that lack of information, the Ministry of Finance is currently in conversation with the various NGOs trying to ascertain the relevant information. Whether we are satisfied, I think our primary concern, anytime there is significant amount of taxpayers' dollars spent on any program in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and there is a lack of information as to where and how it was spent, that is an issue. And I hope it's an issue to any administration, whether it's PLP or F&M.
Your second question, Jasper.
Not my second question, a follow-up question that I didn't feel was answered when I asked the original question.
You say a follow-up question.
Was the government able to get the documentation from the former chair of the Food Task Force on spending?
What I said was that the government of the Bahamas is currently in conversation with the relevant organizers of that task force as well as NGOs. So that conversation remains ongoing.
And my second question for clarification on piggybacking on Rashad's question, did the government pay for Shabak, which includes the press secretary, to go to Dubai?
I said that there were 3 groups that the government of the Bahamas didn't pay for, and others. And Shabak include that as well. The government of the Bahamas did not pay for Shabak to participate in the National Day.
Thank you. We move on to Francesca Brown. Your first of 2 questions.
Hi, good afternoon. My questions have been asked and answered. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Oh, that's it?
Yes.
Okay.
So we thank you for your participation in this weekly press briefing. We will see you here next week, where we hope that Press Secretary Clint Watson will be back here, safe and sound, on the mound. So thank you once again.